about this time, Allan a Dale joined the merry band in Sherwood Forest. He it was whose voice was as sweet as the thrush, but his sorrow made his song more like the dove. For the sweet Ellen a Dale, whom he loved and who loved him, was to marry old Sir Stephen of Trent, albeit she wished it not. But Ellen's father thought it would be a grand thing to have his daughter marry so high. Therefore Robin and his band swore that they would help young Allan take Ellen to his wife, that she might not be forced to marry that same vile Sir Stephen.
But stay, now I bethink me there is one thing reckoned not upon, the priest. Truly those of the cloth do not love me overmuch.
I know of a certain friar that, couldst thou but get on the soft side of him, would do thy business, even though the Pope stood forth to ban him. He is known as the Kirtle Friar of Fountain Abbey, and dwelleth in the Fountain Dale.
Then I swear by the bright hair of Saint Alfreda that in 2 days hence Ellen a Dale shall be the wife to young Allan. I'll seek this same friar, and I warrant I will get upon the soft side of him, even if I have to drub one soft.
Be not too sure of that, good uncle.
Early next morning, Robin Hood and 4 of his stout yeomen, Little John, Will Scarlet, David of Doncaster, and Arthur a Bland, set forth to seek the friar of Fountain Abbey. Mile after mile they strode along, now across a brawling stream, now along a sunlit road, now down some sweet forest path, over which the trees met in green and rustling canopy, and at the end of which a herd of startled deer dashed away with rattle of leaves and crackle of branches. Finally, Will Scarlet, who had been taking the lead, for he knew whither to go, stopped beside a sweet, bright river.
Now, good uncle, just beyond yon bend ahead of us is a shallow ford which is not deeper than thy mid-thigh, and upon the other side is a certain little hermitage hidden amidst the bosky tangle of thickets, wherein dwelleth the friar whom we seek.
Had I thought that I should have had to wade water, even were it so crystal a stream as this, I had donned other clothes than I have upon me. But no matter now. Bide ye here, lads, and if ye hear me sound upon my bugle horn, come quickly.
So saying, Robin turned and left them, striding onward alone. Soon he stopped suddenly, for he thought that he heard voices, and yet the 2 voices were wondrously alike. Quietly he came to the river bank, and laying him down upon the grass, peered over the edge and down below. All around grew a mass of feathery ferns, such as hide and nestle in cool places, and up to Robin's nostrils came the tender odor of the wild thyme that loves the moist verges of running streams. There, with his broad back against the rugged trunk of the willow tree, and half hidden by the soft ferns around him, sat a stout, brawny fellow, eating, but no other man was there. His head was as round as a ball, and covered with a mat of close-clipped, curly black hair that grew low down on his forehead. But his crown was shorn as smooth as the palm of one's hand, which, together with his loose robe, cowl, and string of beads, showed that which his looks never would have done, that he was a friar. When he was done with his eating, the friar wiped his greasy hands upon the ferns and wild thyme, took up his flask, and began talking to himself as though he were another man, and answering himself as though he were somebody else.
Dear lad, thou art the sweetest fellow in all the world. And I do love thee as thou lovest me. Nay, then, wilt thou not take a drink of good Malmsey? After thee, lad, after thee. Nay, I beseech thee, sweeten the draught with thy lips. If thou wilt force it on me so, I must needs do thy bidding, yet with the more pleasure do I so as I drink to thy very great health. And now, sweet lad, 'tis thy turn next. I take it, sweet Chuck, and here's wishing thee as much good as thou wishedst me. What spy have we here? Come forth, thou limb of evil, and I will carve thee into as fine a pudding meat as e'er a wife in Yorkshire cooked of a Sunday.
Nay, put up thy pinking iron, friend. I tell thee, my throat is as parched as a barley stubble in October. Hast thou happily any malmsley left in that stout pottle?
Oh, truly thou dost ask thyself freely where thou art not bidden. Yet I trust I am too good a Christian to refuse any man drink that is athirst.
Dost thou know the country hereabouts, thou good and holy man?
Yea, somewhat.
Then perchance thou knowest also of a certain friar of Fountain Abbey.
Yea, somewhat.
Well then, good fellow, I would know whether this same friar is to be found upon this side of the river or the other.
I do advise thee to find that out by the aid of thine own five senses, sight, feeling, and what not.
I do wish much to cross yon ford, and strive to find this same good friar.
Truly it is a goodly wish on the part of one so young. Far be it from me to check thee in so bold a quest. Friend, the river is free to all.
Yea, good father. But thou seest that my clothes are of the finest, and I fain would not get them wet. Methinks thy shoulders are stout and broad. Couldst thou not find it in thy heart to carry me across?
Now, by the white hand of the Holy Lady of the Fountain, dost thou poor puny stripling, thou kiss my lady La Popinjay, dost thou ask me, the holy Tuck, to carry thee?
Aye.
Now I swear. But why should I not? Did not the holy Saint Christopher ever carry the stranger across the river? And should I, poor sinner that I am, be ashamed to do likewise? Come and give me thy weapon, that I may tuck it beneath mine arm, that it may not get wet.
Nay, good father, I would not burden thee with aught of mine but myself.
Nay, give me thy broadsword as I bid thee, for I would carry it as a penance to my pride.
Robin unbuckled his sword and handed it to the friar, who thrust it with his own beneath his arm, then, with Robin upon his back, splashed across the water.
Many thanks, good father. Thou art indeed a good and holy man. Prithee give me my sword, and let me go away, for I am in haste.
Nay, good youth, I doubt not that thou art in haste with thine affairs, yet thou dost think nothing of mine. Thine are of a carnal nature, mine are of a spiritual nature, a holy work, so to speak. Moreover, mine affairs do lie upon the other side of this stream. I see by thy quest of the same holy friar that thou art a good young man, and most reverent to the cloth. I did get wet coming hither, and am sadly afraid that should I wade in the water again, I might get certain cricks and pains in the joints that would mar my devotions for many a day to come. I know that since I've so humbly done thy bidding, thou wilt carry me back again. If thou seest how St. Godric, that holy hermit whose natal day this is, hath placed in my hands 2 swords, and in thine never a one. Therefore be persuaded, good youth, and carry me back again.
Thou cunning friar, thou hast me fair and fast. Not one of thy cloth hath so hoodwinked me in all my days before. I might have known from thy looks that thou wert no such holy man as thou didst pretend to be.
Nay, I bid thee speak not so scurrilously, neither, lest thou mayest perchance feel the prick of an inch or 2 of blue steel.
Give me my sword, and I wilt carry thee back straightway.
Here is thy skewer, but I shall keep my own. Now get thyself presently ready, for I would hasten back.
So Robin took his sword again and buckled it at his side. Then he bent his stout back and took the friar upon it. Now Robin Hood had a heavier load to carry in the friar than the friar had in him. Moreover, he did not know the ford, so he went stumbling among the stones now stepping into a deep hole, now nearly tripping over a boulder, while the sweat ran down his face in beads from the hardness of his journey and the heaviness of his load. Meantime, the friar kept digging his heels into Robin's sides and bidding him hasten.
Hurry, good youth, for I must to my meditations. Oh, careful, careful, thou clumsy lad. Do not stumble with thy precious burden.
To all this, Robin answered never a word, but having softly felt around till he found the buckle of the belt that held the friar's sword, he worked slyly at the fastening, seeking to loosen it. By the time they had reached the other bank, the friar's sword belt was loose, albeit he knew it not. So when Robin stood on dry land, and the friar leaped from his back, Robin gripped hold of the sword, leaving the holy man without a weapon.
Now then, I have thee, fellow. This time that same saint of whom thou didst speak but now hath delivered 2 swords into my hand, and hath stripped thine away from thee.
Truly.
Now, if thou dost not carry me back, and that speedily, I swear I'll prick thy skin till it is as full of holes as a plucked goose.
Now I did think that thy wits were of the heavy sort, and knew not that thou wert so cunning. Truly thou hast me upon the hip. Give me my sword, and I promise to do thy bidding, and take thee upon my back, and carry thee.
Buckling his sword to his side again, the friar took Robin Hood upon his back once more, and without a word stepped into the water, and so waded on in silence, while Robin sat, laughing upon his back. At last he reached the middle of the ford, where the water was deepest. Here he stopped for a moment, and then, with a sudden lift of his hand and heave of his shoulders, fairly shot Robin over his head as though he were a sack of grain.
There, let that cool thy hot spirit, if it may.
Stay, thou villain! I am after thee straight, and if I do not carve thy brawn from thee this day, may I never lift finger again.
Thou needst not hasten thyself unduly, for I will abide here until thou draggest thy wet self from the stream.
Look to thyself.
The swords flashed in the sun and then met with a clash that sounded far and near. Right and left and up and down and back and forth they fought. Thus they strove for an hour or more, pausing every now and then to rest, at which times each looked at the other with wonder, and thought that never had he seen so stout a fellow.
Hold thy hand, good friend. Now I crave a boon ere we begin again.
What wouldst thou have of me?
Only this, that thou wilt let me blow thrice upon my bugle horn.
Ah. Now I do verily think that thou hast some cunning trick in this. Nevertheless, I fear thee not, and will let thee have thy wish, providing thou wilt also let me blow thrice upon this little whistle.
With all my heart. So, here goes for one.
Scarcely had the echo of the last note of Robin's bugle come winding back from across the river, when 4 tall men in Lincoln green came running, each with a bow in his hand, and an arrow ready knocked upon the string.
Ah, it is thus, thou traitor knave. Then, marry, look to thyself.
Straightway the friar clapped a pretty silver whistle to his lips, and blew a blast that was both loud and shrill. And now there came a crackling of the bushes that lined the other side of the road, and presently, forth from the covert, burst 4 great, shaggy hounds.
At them, sweet lips, at 'em, bell throat, at 'em, beauty, at 'em, fang.
Before one could say "Gaffer down the dale," the hounds were upon Robin, and he had only time to drop his sword and leap lightly into the tree, around which the hounds gathered, looking up at him as though he were a cat on the eaves. Then he pointed down the road to where the 4 yeomen were standing, stock still, with wonder of what they saw.
At 'em.
As the hawk darts down upon its quarry, so sped the 4 dogs at the yeomen. But when the 4 men saw the hounds so coming, all with one accord, saving only Will Scarlet, drew each man his goose feather to his ear, and let fly his shaft. Now each dog so shot at leaped lightly aside, and as the arrow passed him, whistling, caught it in his mouth and bit it in twain. Now it would have been an ill day for these four good fellows had not Will Scarlet stopped before the others and met the hounds as they came rushing.
Why, how now, Fangs? Down, Beauty, down, Bellthroat.
At the sound of his voice, each dog shrank back quickly, and then straightway came to him and licked his hands and fawned upon him, as is the wont of dogs that meet one they know.
Why, what means this? Art thou wizard to turn those wolves into lambs? Can I trust mine eyes? What means it that I see young Master William Gamwell in such company?
Nay, Tuck, my name is no longer Will Gamwell, but Will Scarlet, and this good fellow hanging in yon tree is my uncle Robin Hood, with whom I am abiding just now.
Truly, good master, I have oft heard thy name both sung and spoken of, but I never thought to meet thee in battle. I crave thy forgiveness, and do wonder not that I found so stout a man against me.
Thou most holy father, I am more thankful than e'er I was in all my life before, that our good friend Will knew thee and thy dogs.
And I too, Little John, for they did tree me like a tomcat. But we have yet to find that friar of Fountain Abbey.
Why, uncle, thou hast not far to go, for there he stands beside thee.
How? Art thou the man that I have been at such pains to seek all day, and have got such a ducking for?
Why, truly some do call me the Curtal Friar. Others again call me in jest the Abbot of Fountain Abbey. Others still again call me simple Friar Tuck.
I like the last name best, for it doth slip more glibly off the tongue. But why didst thou not tell me thou wert he I sought, instead of sending me searching for black moon?
Why, truly thou didst not ask me, good master. But what didst thou desire of me?
Nay, the day groweth late, and we cannot stand longer talking here. Come back with us to Sherwood, and I will unfold all to thee as we travel along.
So, without tarrying longer, they all departed, with the stout dogs at their heels, and wended their way back to Sherwood again. And Friar Tuck married Alan and Ellen, with the help of Robin and the merry band, who stood beside with swords upon Sir Stephen and Ellen's father. And afterwards, Friar Tuck remained in Sherwood to oversee holy matters and to enjoy the merry life with the others. So passed the gentle springtime away in budding beauty, its silver showers and sunshine, its green meadows and its flowers. So likewise passed the summer, with its yellow sunlight, its quivering heat and deep bosky foliage, its long twilights and its mellow nights, through which the frogs croaked and fairy folk were said to be out on the hillsides. And so passed the fall, when the stubble lay all crisp and naked to the sky, and the green leaves turned russet and brown. And so also passed the winter time, when the north wind piles the snow in drifts around the gables, and the fire crackles warm upon the hearth. So passed the seasons then, so they pass now, and so they will pass in time to come, while we come and go like leaves of a tree that fall and are soon forgotten. And after many years, King Henry died, and King Richard of the Lion's Heart came to the throne. And Robin and his merry band loved the new king, and swore they would pour out their blood like water for him. And the king, hearing of Robin and his men, sought them out and enlisted them in his service.
Good Robin, hereby I give thee and all thy band free pardon. But truly I cannot let you roam the forest as you have done in the past. Therefore I will take thee and that bold knave Little John also, likewise thy cousin Will Scarlet and thy minstrel Alan a Dale. and you shall go back to London with me.
And the rest of my merry band?
We will take their names and have them duly recorded as Royal Rangers, for methinks it were wiser to have them changed to law-abiding caretakers of our deer in Sherwood than to leave them to run at large as outlawed slayers thereof.
So Robin Hood and Little John and Will Scarlet and Alan a Dale shook hands with all the rest of the band, kissing the cheeks of each man, and swearing that they would often come to Sherwood to see them. Then each mounted his horse and rode away in the train of the king. Thus end the merry adventures of Robin Hood, for, in spite of his promise, it was many a year ere he saw Sherwood again. After a year or two at court, Little John came back to Nottinghamshire, where he achieved great fame as the champion of all England with the quarterstaff. Will Scarlet, too, returned to his home. Robin, through his great fame as an archer, became a favorite with the king, so that he speedily rose in rank to be the chief of all the yeomen and was made the Earl of Huntingdon. After many years, King Richard died upon the battlefield, and Robin's mind turned again with great longing to his forest life. Straightway he went to King John, and sought leave of him to visit Nottingham, and to behold the woodlands once more, which leave the king granted him. So Robin Hood and Alan a Dale set forth without delay to Nottinghamshire and Sherwood Forest. As they passed along the road, it seemed to Robin that he knew every stick and stone that his eyes looked upon. Yonder was a path that he had oft times trod of a mellow evening, with Little John beside him. Here was one, now nigh choked with brambles, along which he and a little band had walked when they went forth to seek a certain Curtal Friar. Thus at last they came to the open glade and the broad, wide-spreading greenwood tree which was their home for so many years. Neither of the two spoke when they stood beneath that tree. Robin looked all about him at the well-known things, so like what they used to be, and yet so different. For where once was the bustle of many busy fellows, was now the quietness of solitude. And as he looked, the woodlands, the greensward, and the sky all blurred together in his sight through salt tears, for such a great yearning came upon him as he looked on these things, that he could not keep back the water from his eyes. Then came a longing to sound his bugle once more. He raised it to his lips and blew a blast. The sweet, clear notes went winding down the forest paths, coming back again from the more distant, bosky shades, in faint echoes of sound, until it faded away and was lost. Now it chanced that on that very morn, Little John was walking through a spur of the forest, sunk in meditation, and as he paced along, the faint, clear notes of a distant bugle horn came to his ear. All the blood in his body seemed to rush like a flame into his cheeks as he bent his head and listened. Again came the bugle note, thin and clear, and yet again it sounded. Then Little John gave a great, wild cry of yearning, of joy, and yet of grief. And putting down his head, he dashed into the thicket until, at last, he burst from the covert and rushed forward and flung himself at Robin's feet. Then he clasped his arms around the master's knees, and all his body was shaken with great sobs. Neither could Robin nor Alan a Dale speak, but stood looking down at Little John, the tears rolling down their cheeks. And while they thus stood, 7 Royal Rangers rushed into the open glade and raised a great shout of joy at the sight of Robin. And at their head was Will Stutely. Then, after a while, came 4 more, panting with their running, and 2 of these 4 were Will Scathelock and Midge the Miller.
Now I swear that never again will I leave these dear woodlands. I've been away from them and from you too long. Now do I lay by the name of Robert, Earl of Huntington, and take upon me once again that nobler title of Robin Hood the Yeoman.
The news that Robin Hood had come back again to dwell in Sherwood as of old spread like wildfire all over the countryside, so that ere a week had passed, nearly all of his old yeomen had gathered about him again. But when the news reached the ears of the new king, he swore both loud and deep that he would not rest until he had Robin Hood in his power, dead or alive. But the king's men and the worshipful sheriff searched up and down, yet found him not, for Robin wished to be peaceful, and not fight against the king or his men. Yet there came a day when Robin and his yeomen met the sheriff and the king's men in the forest, and a bloody fight followed. The first man slain in that fight was the sheriff, but many a better man than he kissed the sod that day. Finally the king's men withdrew, but scores of good fellows were left behind, stretched out all stiff beneath the sweet green boughs.
Though we have beaten off our enemies in fair fight, all this death lay heavily upon our Master Robin's mind.
Aye, Little John, and he hath brooded over it until a fever hath seized upon him.
Look yonder, noble Will, he beckons to us.
It is the morning of the 4th day, and methinks I cannot shake this fever from me. Therefore, Little John, I would go to my cousin, the prioress of the nunnery near Kirklees.
Nay, good Robin, that lies in Yorkshire.
Nevertheless, she is a skilful leech, and I would have her open a vein in my arm and take a little blood for the bettering of my health. Make ready, Little John, for I will need thy aid in journeying. And you, brave Will, wilt be the captain of the band until we should come back.
And thus, by easy stages and slow journeying, Robin and Little John reached the nunnery of Kirklees. Now Robin had done much to aid this cousin, but there is naught in the world so easily forgot as gratitude. So when the prioress heard how Robin had thrown away his earldom and gone back again to Sherwood, she began plotting ill against him, thinking that by doing evil to him she might find favor with his enemies. Keeping Little John back, she led Robin up a winding stone stair to a room which was just beneath the eaves of a high round tower. Then the prioress took a little cord and tied it tightly about Robin's arm, as though she were about to bleed him. But the vein she opened was not one of those that lie close and blue beneath the skin. Deeper she cut than that, for she opened one of those veins through which the bright red blood runs leaping from the heart. Having done this vile deed, she turned and left her cousin, locking the door behind her. All that livelong day the blood ran from Robin's arm, nor could he check it, though he strove in every way to do so. Again and again he called for help, but no help came, for his cousin had betrayed him, and Little John was too far away to hear his voice. So he bled and bled until he felt his strength slipping away from him. Then he arose, tottering and bearing himself up by the palms of his hands against the wall, and reached his bugle horn at last. Thrice he sounded it, but weakly and faintly, for his breath was fluttering through sickness and loss of strength. Nevertheless, Little John heard it where he lay in a nearby glade. With a heart all sick with dread, he came running and leaping toward the nunnery. Loudly he knocked at the door, and in a loud voice shouted for them to let him in.
Let me in!
But the door was of massive oak, strongly barred and studded with spikes, so they felt safe, and bade Little John be gone. Wildly he looked about him, and finding a heavy stone, such as 3 men could not lift nowadays, he seized it, and staggering under its weight, came forward and hurled it crashing against the door. In burst the door, and away fled the frightened nuns, shrieking at his coming. Up the winding stone steps he ran till he reached the room where Robin was. Putting his shoulder against it, he burst the locks as though they were made of brittle ice. There he saw his own dear master, leaning against the grey stone wall, his face all white and drawn, and his head swaying to and fro with weakness. Little John leaped forward and caught Robin Hood in his arms. Up he lifted him as a mother lifts her child, and, carrying him to the bed, laid him tenderly thereon. When the blood was stopped, Little John spoke cheerful words, laughing and pretending gaiety.
Surely no stout yeoman will die at the loss of a few drops of blood. Why, give thee a week, Robin, and thou wilt be roaming the woodlands as boldly as ever.
Mine own dear Little John, heaven bless thy kind rough heart. But, dear friend, we will never roam the woodlands together
Aye,
again.
but we will. I say again, out upon it. Who dares say that any more harm shall come upon thee? Am I not by? Let me see who dares touch. Now, if aught of harm befalls thee because of this day's doings, I swear by St. George that the red cock shall crow over the roof tree of this house, for the hot flames shall lick every crack and cranny thereof. As for these women, it will be an ill day for them.
Nay, Little John, give me thy rough brown fist. Since what time hath my good right-hand man thought to harm women, even in vengeance?
Then a silence fell, and Little John sat with Robin Hood's hand in his, gazing out of the open windows, ever and anon swallowing a great lump that came in his throat. Meantime the sun dropped slowly to the west, till all the sky was ablaze with red glory.
Little John, I would look out once more upon the woodlands.
So the yeoman lifted Robin in his arms as he bade, and Robin Hood's head lay on his friend's shoulder. Long he gazed with a wide, lingering look, while the other sat with bowed head, the hot tears rolling one after another from his eyes and dripping upon his chest, for he felt that the time of parting was near at hand.
Dear Little John, string my bow for me, and choose a smooth fair arrow from out my quiver.
This Little John did, though without disturbing his master or raising from where he sat. Robin Hood's fingers wrapped lovingly around his good bow, and he smiled faintly when he felt it in his grasp. Then he knocked the arrow on that part of the string that the tips of his fingers knew so well.
Little John, mine own dear friend, and him I love better than all others in the world, mark, I prithee, where this arrow lodges, and there let my grave be digged. Lay me with my face toward the east, Little John, and see that my resting place be kept green, and that my weary bones be not disturbed.
Aye, Robin.
As he finished speaking, he raised himself of a sudden and sat upright. His old strength seemed to come back to him, and drawing the bowstring to his ear, he sped the arrow out of the open casement. As the shaft flew, his hand sank slowly with the bow, till it lay across his knees, and his body likewise sank back again into Little John's loving arms. But something had sped from that body, even as the winged arrow sped from the bow. For some minutes Little John sat motionless, but presently he laid that which he held gently down. Then, folding the hands upon the breast and covering up the face, he turned upon his heel and left the room without a word or a sound. Upon the steep stairway he met the prioress and some of the chief among the sisters.
If ye go within a score of feet of yonder room, I will tear down your rookery over your heads, so that not one stone shall be left upon another. Bear my words well in mind, for I mean them.
In the early grey of the coming morn did Little John and 6 more of the band return to carry Robin forth from the nunnery. And they took him to where his arrow was found, stuck in a large oak inside the greenwood, and there they buried him. And upon a stone at Kirklees there is today an old inscription in the ancient English, and thus it runs: Here underneath this little stone lies Robert, Earl of Huntingdon. No archer were as he so good, and people called him Robin Hood. Such outlaws as he and his men will England never see again. December 1247.